I think it's a terrible idea.
But we all love the idea of Batman. Come on. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Legitimate Cybersecurity. Today, Dustin and I are really privileged to have one of the most interesting people I think I've ever met join our show. Specifically, Chris Adkins, who works with us currently, has seen a lot of interesting things from weird angles in cyber. He's another example of someone who got into cyber through a non-traditional route, which is how a lot of people end up getting into cybersecurity these days. And we often know that one of the things most of you ask is, how do I get into cybersecurity? What's that look like? And I think as we've gone further down this route, we've learned there's a lot of different ways to get to this destination. There's no single right way, but that as a result can make it a little more difficult to try and actually figure out if there's a proven formula. So Chris, thank you so much for coming onto the show today. We kind of want to kick things off with, tell us about your transition from SOC to you started, well, first you started in the Navy, but then when you got out, you joined a SOC. What was that transition like? And how was, and for those of you who don't know, SOC stands for Security Operations Center. It is the part of an organization that keeps an eye on all the security elements, specifically cybersecurity, 24/7. It's often considered one of the starting places for cybersecurity. And a lot of people we use the phrase, make their bones there, right? To then move on to other parts of cybersecurity. So, Chris, tell us about the Navy, what you liked about it, and what made you decide to get into cybersecurity out of that.
Yeah.
And because I know you were trapped in submarines for a while too. So, I mean, what were you just under the sea with Ariel and Flounder? I think I will do cyber.
Whales,
it's a short
and dolphins.
list, right? What you liked about the Navy.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so first off, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate the invite and being here. Yeah, so my time in the Navy it's interesting because, Frank, you talk about like being in the SOC and there's like no one way into cybersecurity. So I kind of had to back up a little bit from the SOC to, because I think it's an important part of how I got to the SOC, right? So when I was in the Navy, I did a couple of things. So first off, I was on a submarine and I was a sonar technician. So nothing security involved there, right? But a lot of IT work, right? Like, so interesting. I don't know that I've ever actually like really talked about the sonar stack much, and it's not 100% relevant, but I think it's pretty cool. And one of the things that we did is we had a new sonar system installed when I was on the boat in like 2007, 2008, but it ran on, there were Linux servers, right? Just plain old I think it was Red Hat at the time.
Yeah.
But one of the other things that it had was, and I'm going to forget the exact name of what Apple called it, but it was the old Apple servers that they had. Xserve maybe is what it was called. I think it was Xserve, right?
Sounds familiar.
That was part of the technology stack, right? And so what I didn't realize,
I'm kind of surprised there was a bunch of Apple stuff.
Yeah,
submarine.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, there was two servers, right? There was two redundant Xserve servers, right? Out of the probably 50 we had on the in the sonar shack. So it wasn't a ton, but it surprised everybody at the time because everything, that was new at that time, considering what was there. But like the whole point of that is that I didn't know it at the time. And I look back now and a lot of the work I was doing was IT related in some form or fashion. We had to fix stuff underway, right? But so while I was there on the submarine, one of the things that was new at the time as well was they started introducing IT folks onto the boat, right? It wasn't a job at that time. It was just, but somebody had to do it. We had email and all these things, right? And so one of the more senior guys had been appointed that person. And I, being the nerd that I am, was like, well, I want to help with that stuff. So I like attached myself to his hip for a while. And I was, fixing printers and resetting passwords, like doing some of this kind of like grunt work stuff that you see a lot of help desk folks do, right? So from there, I transitioned to a place in Washington State where I was tracking submarines, but that was my shore duty, right? And that was the point where my daughter was born. I was trying to figure out what the hell am I going to do with my life, right? Like I have a child. I'm not going to be in the Navy forever. And that's where I kind of was like poking around. I was like, what do I enjoy to do or enjoy doing, right? And it was at this point in time where I was like, I had discovered BackTrack 4. And it was kind of like, I was messing with it and like, well, how do you do this for a career, right? Like, what is this? How do I get paid to have fun doing this stuff?
You just hit my nostalgia chord with that. I miss BackTrack.
Right?
I love Cali, but man, anyone who can still remember BackTrack. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'm fairly certain because it was like BackTrack 4, BackTrack 5, and then it went to Cali, right? I think it was 4. And so that's where I stumbled upon cybersecurity, right? I was like, oh, hey, they pay people to do this. And you can go to school for it. Like there was all these things, right? And that's what sort of like really triggered things for me. And so when I got out of the Navy, you guys might get a lot of things out of me that I've never told people today.
All right.
Or that aren't common knowledge, I should say.
Let them out.
Yep.
And so when I got out of the Navy in 2012, we were still in that weird space after 2008 where everything was kind of in the dumpster, right? And jobs were few and far between. So I was getting offers from to go be insurance salesman and these kind of weird things. And there was at that point, my wife and I decided, you know what, we're going back to Houston, major city, should be able to find something. Came back, I got here. I accepted a job at a company called WCA, which is a waste management company, to go be a service desk guy, right? Like that was what I was imaging machines and stuff. I took that job because BP, who I had also applied for, was taking forever, right? So I accepted this job at WCA. I went and imaged computers and fixed some printers for about 2 weeks. I was there for 2 weeks before I put in my notice. I don't even put it on my resume. When BP hired me, and to Frank's point, is when I started working in a SOC, right? I was very familiar with the Panama schedule because that's what I had done in my Navy career for forever, right? And so a couple of things happened when I was at BP. One is that because they were BP at this time, they would get calls from every vendor out there, right? So we were doing POCs like crazy all the time. Like to give you, sort of a sense of this time period, right? I led the POC was heavily involved in the POC for FireEye, the original FireEye products, the original Palantir products.
Wow.
Something called Dumbala, which is not around anymore, which was a similar-ish technology to FireEye, right? I lived in ArcSight. That's what we did, right? And so I spent a lot of my time on nights and weekends doing this POC work, right? But also just sitting in the SOC, right? Going through alerts, going through events, creating rules and correlations in ArcSight, which was terrible, right? It was a horrendous time. And I had previously done Panama work for 5 years, and then to come back and do it again, it was like, oh my God, here we go again. And it was rough on the body.
I'm sorry, this was 2008.
No, so my time at BP would have been 2012, 13, 14, or 13, 14, 15, somewhere right in that area. And so I was fortunate that I got to hands-on on a lot of these really cool tools. And then I'll just keep going here a little bit to kind of tell you my journey and how I got to where I'm at. Yeah. And so I got a call from Booz Allen Hamilton when I was at BP. I was making decent money. I was enjoying it, but it was the Panama schedule. It was like, I've got to get out of this. And if anybody out there that's ever worked in the oil and gas industry, the ups and downs of that industry, right? So there was a lot of sort of factors. BP had just settled the lawsuit for Deep Horizon, and so there was a lot going on internally, and I was making that decision. I got to get out of here. And so I got hired on as a contractor for Booz Allen Hamilton to go work at Hess Oil and Gas. I was an oil and gas guy. And the interesting part of that job, this sort of leads to, my career here, is that the CISO at Hess at the time, he loved new products, loved new products. So I kind of almost transitioned from being POC guy at BP to being POC guy at Hess as well. And so I just kept getting all these new and different technologies, right? It's a lot of stuff at Hess. I don't even remember what they're called, right? That's how low level or new some of these tools were. They didn't even make it, right? There was some Palo Alto stuff that was brand new that we got to play with and stuff. And so I had this culmination through my career over 4 years or so, where it was just a tool, and really learned how all of these things incorporated into a SOC specifically, and right there in that analyst workflow, and what it looked like and what was good and what sucked, because there's a lot of things and processes out there that suck. So that sort of built my entire career, was that ability, or that those circumstances in which I was placed to go and learn all these new technologies and really take advantage of that and kind of just go with the flow. So anytime this whole, how do we get into the industry thing it's a really complicated question. You talk about, like you said, Frank, it's just, I'm a big believer in sometimes you got to take risks, right? I know we talk about risk in our industry all the time, but sometimes you just got to take that leap and take that risk with any job that's technical, right? Because, it's a lot different these days that you can't just jump right into cybersecurity. A lot of times you have to go the alternate route of. I
agree.
And I've got a buddy who's going through this right now. He worked at United I don't know if you guys have flown, obviously, but all the gate agents, right?
In planes.
In planes, yeah. They all use iPads and iPhones, right? The devices. He worked for about a year as the guy that would go fix those, right? but he has a degree in whatever cybersecurity field from University of Houston down here. And he's recently transitioned to another company where he's an IT guy, right? Like, so he's like building his way up. And the youths that come and ask me, I always tell them, like, you just got to, anything, right? Anything in IT is where you really got to start today. And move. And then there, we can talk about certifications and all that stuff. That's my 2 cents and kind of how I got where I am. I consider myself very fortunate, right? I don't know that I could repeat today what I was able to do early in my career.
So real quick, and I think that is really good advice for anybody who's like looking, because you're still going to learn like that level of, if you're on the IT help desk, you're going to learn a lot, and you are going to do some cybersecurity stuff, right?
Yep, it's inherent in what they do.
Someone's going to get a virus, someone's going to get ransomware, someone's going to, DLP is going to alert, and you're going to have to go and figure out what they're doing. With you've had such kind of an evolution with technology and the technology that kind of runs cybersecurity on the back end. Was there a particular technology in that kind of like space between 2008 and and even now, where you were like, oh, let's take now out of, because I don't want to hear AI.
Okay. Yeah.
From 2008, to let's say 2018, 2019, where you saw a piece of technology that was like a detective, either a detection, MDR, something like that, and you were like, oh, this is new. This is something that's going to fundamentally change how we currently run.
Yeah. I think 2 come to mind, right? Like, and I've said it a lot, this name a lot already, because it sticks with me. The FireEye appliances, right? Because they were appliances at the time, I really think fundamentally changed a lot of what we did, right? Because at that time, you have to remember that everything was just essentially firewall log correlations with outdated threat intelligence. That's what it was, right? And it was a pain. And like part of the workflow was, so let's take this IP address and log into the firewall and block it, right? Like that was, but at that time, those FireEye products, we're now more real time than we had ever been at that point, right? That was a huge one. And I don't remember exactly when the first time I came across or was introduced to something like CrowdStrike or SentinelOne, right? Like, or even, Defender is obviously not as old as those, but like that EDR product, right? Where we moved from antivirus to EDR, right? That was huge. That was massive, right? And I'll give you one more. There was something that stuck in my head when I was at Hess, and I'm not going to remember the exact name of the product. They're still around. It was a Palo Alto product, but it was the first time I had ever seen a company take all of this security data and put it into one spot outside of an ArcSight, right? Like it's going to kill me. Yeah. Outside of bigger than just a SIM though, just bigger than just an ArcSight SIM, right? Like you started ingesting additional data instead of just logs, right? That was one of those
SOARs now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they didn't call it that at the time.
No, I'm also kind of hoping the phrase SOAR dies, because I'm like, so it's like a SIM.
Yeah, exactly. It's a SIM, but with automation and all these additional things.
No, keep going though. Sorry for interrupting.
No, you're good. I remember seeing that and going, after sitting in the SOC for so long, it was 18 months. It felt like forever. But doing that for so long in the 100 screens and different browsers, like it was just this moment of like, this is it, right? This is what is needed, right? So those 3 things like really stick in my head. And for the record, AI, I wasn't going to say that either way. I saw a video. I haven't read the whole article yet, but Daniel Meisler wrote a blog about AI and security yesterday, essentially I'm not going to try and derail too much here, but essentially saying that there's not a bubble coming, but there there might be, but that's separate. But within cybersecurity and AI, that he thinks that there is there's going to be a huge increase in breaches, essentially, is what he's saying, because of what's happening with AI and the way not because AI is good, but because of the way it's being used. Which when he speaks, I tend to listen when it comes to that kind of stuff. So
on the blue side or the red side, do you think? That's actually a really good topic to discuss, because saying that AI is going to cause more breaches in the field of cyber, there's always going to be more breaches in the field of cyber. If there's one thing I can
100%.
guarantee is we're going to keep having breaches, and it's probably going to get worse. And I know you said you hadn't read the whole thing, but did you see if it was from advocating from the red side or blue side or both? Because I feel like there's an argument here that cybersecurity incidents will occur more often because of AI implementation but I think it's going to be on both sides. One, it makes hacking a lot easier, right? We see that it makes the process of hacking, exploiting, and so forth a lot easier, taking a lot of information, identifying a weakness and going after it and then moving laterally. But I also think the over-reliance on it from the blue side, from the defender,
exactly.
You place a lot of trust in it, you're going to assume, and because at first AI does a really good job in that first implementation to come off really well, but you give it more trust and you trust it a little bit more. It's usually in a couple days it starts making some serious critical errors, and when it does, it's bad. So I think it's a two-ended problem in that regard.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree, right? Like, but part of the hypothesis, right, is that what we're seeing is companies are replacing people with AI, right? Which is a whole nother topic, right? But what we're seeing is people using that excuse to downsize organizations, right? And using AI to replace these things, right? So you kind of have like this cascading effect almost of, we're seeing AI being used in attacks. We're seeing it being integrated into security tools left and right all over the place, right? It's still not at a point where it doesn't hallucinate, like you said, right? So you're sort of seeing this cascading effect of the use of AI. You're removing people and you're offloading processes to something that's more automated, has a tendency to be wrong, right? So the breaches will always increase. You're correct, Frank, right? But I think his hypothesis, and I tend to agree, is that we're going to see an exponential increase because of this, right? Because you're reducing all of these other things and replacing it with something that's error prone. And, he also talks about like, one of the things we're lacking is the plumbing within AI, the architecture or the integrations and the architecture around it. But that's sort of, that's my 2 cents on it. I guess I would say is like, you're going to see it more and more. An exponential increase, I think, is the better way to put it.
So going back then to your movement from sonar technician into cybersecurity, that's qualifying as a career shift, right? You made a career change.
Yep.
I have found that some people who are in separate fields talk a lot about wanting to get into cyber, but it proves rather difficult, especially when they're established in another career field. And I'd like to pick your brain a little bit on that, question for everybody actually here. And the example I'll use is a few years ago, I was getting my teeth cleaned by a dental hygienist.
Okay.
And he said, I understand you're in cybersecurity. And I said, yes. He goes, tough market to get into. Man, they really must be oversaturated. I'm like, please tell me more, because we all know the stats here that there's not enough people. And he goes, well, I have my master's degree in cybersecurity, to which I was befuddled, right? Here's the guy who's the dental hygienist cleaning my teeth. I'm like, well, why'd you get that? He goes, because I want to be in cyber. I'm like, well, why aren't you? He goes, no one will hire me. And I said, why won't they hire you? He goes, well, I keep applying for all these, SOC leadership positions and they're not hiring me. And I'm like, well,
experience.
Dude, you have no experience. All your experience says dental hygienist. He goes, yeah, but I make more as a dental hygienist than if I just started in the SOC. And I'm like, yes. But if you start in the SOC and then work forward, you will eventually make more than potentially as a dental hygienist. And I'm wondering, there's 2 parts to this question. I'm expanding it further then. Do you think that's the big struggle in getting, career changers into cyber? Do you think there has to be something like a no situation, like I got to do something? And then on top of that, why do you think more people who are at the start of their career, say recent college graduates or recent high school graduates or anyone who's younger, why is there so little interest in getting into cybersecurity? Because the example was, and this is a dated statistic, but it was only 1 in 10 millennials high school graduates would consider a career in cybersecurity. That's not saying they wanted one. That's saying they thought of it, right?
Yeah.
So like, what do you guys think the issue is there?
I have an opinion on that, because I don't know that anybody's ever asked me that question before, why people aren't considering it, right? So if I ask you, Frank, what does an accountant do? Pretty obvious, right? Like, well, not obvious, right? But we have a really good understanding
they do accounting
of what it,
and taxes,
numbers. We have a decent understanding of what an accountant does, or even a civil engineer, right? Like, but when you say to somebody, when somebody asks you, what do you do, Frank? What's your job in cybersecurity, right? It's sort of this abstract, nobody really knows what it is, right?
Unless you're in the field, it's hard to understand.
Unless you're in the field, it's very difficult to understand. I don't think we've done a really good job of explaining to people who may be younger what is cybersecurity, right? Like, there's probably not a ton of resources out there. Like, a great example, the SOC leadership guy, right? Like, he saw leadership. He's an experienced guy. He's got a master's. So he thought immediately, I'm a leader, right? I have the experience, right? What he doesn't realize is what exactly that means to be in a SOC, be an analyst. So even the difference between a level 1, level 2, level 3 analyst, then to be the SOC leader, right? Like there's a lot in that people I don't think understand. And even when you tell somebody like, I work on an IT service desk, right? Most people are going to understand what that means. But if you say, I'm a level 1 SOC analyst, people don't know what the hell that means, right? They don't know what that person is doing. So I think there's an education problem within education. Like in terms of how do we explain what does this mean in terms of what the job is and what the function of a cybersecurity team and department is.
Yeah.
Can I keep going? No, go ahead, Dustin.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to come back to that first part, right, where you talk about like, how do people get in and like the guy applying for the SOC leadership and companies hiring, right? Like one of the things that I've seen, right, especially with companies that are, because the reality is the companies that are hiring for cybersecurity professionals kind of fall into a couple of groups. One, they're the really big organizations, the Walmarts of the world, the JP Morgan Chases, right? Those Fortune 50, they have the budget, right? They have the budget to go hire folks and they're more prone to hire junior folks, right? When you start moving down the Fortune list, right? You go down. You get to the organizations that have a combined IT and security department, right? They're all one. And those folks typically don't hire dedicated security personnel unless they're almost forced to, right? When I say forced to, I mean, they've probably recently experienced a large breach and their eyes have opened, right? And they go, oh my goodness, we've got all these people wearing multiple hats. How are they focusing on only one thing, right? And then when they go into that mode of now we've got to hire, right? Immediately, what do? They go to experience, right? They want those experienced hires. And so those folks aren't hiring the juniors, the straight out of college people, right? Which forces this weird, odd path to try and get in, right? So like, it's easy to say, well, everybody should hire more junior people, right? Well, that's not the reality of the way a lot of businesses work, right? Like, I would love to go hire, even on our team, I would love to go hire 10 people straight out of school, right? And train them and build them, right? Yeah. But how are you going to pay for that, right? Even at a service provider. So like, it's just, it's not I don't know that there's one single answer. This is how you do it, right? My 2 cents, my thoughts.
I've got an anecdote here, and then I have a follow-up question for you because you hit on something that I wanted to talk to you about. I was teaching a course for the DoD, and this was a group of mixed service members who were coming in to go into a specific unit. But the part I was teaching was a red team course, right? So I was teaching them how to use simple things like Metasploit, and we had a lab set up and everything, and we're just teaching them about hacking. And one of the things we did was packet analysis. We had like two days of packet analysis, I think, with Wireshark, right? Like old school, jumping into Wireshark doing packet analysis. There was one of the students, one of the who was just happened to be a Navy guy.
Okay.
He was in there and he was going through and he's like, I fucking hate this. And I was like, what? And he goes, I don't, this is very tedious. I don't like looking at the hexadecimal breakdown of packets. And I was like, you need to go and talk to your detailer and you need to tell them that you don't like this because you're about to go into, like, this is the unit you're going into. This is what they do. And if you don't like this, then maybe this isn't the right place for you, right? And look, I wasn't like chastising him and being like, like the military would usually do. It was like, no, you need to go tell somebody that this is not fun for you because otherwise you're going to be stuck in this billet for 4 years and you're going to hate it and you're probably going to get out of the Navy even if you would have made it a lifetime career anyways, right?
Yeah.
So that's always kind of stuck with me as like, oh, that was a point in my career, and it was kind of a little bit later in my career, but then I was like, I do like doing that. Like I really I love looking at the breakdown of, I love knowing how computers work on that visceral level, right? And most of the men and women that I've worked with who are good at cybersecurity have that same level of dedication and passion to caring about how things work, right? Like there's just this curiosity. Not everybody has it, and that's okay. Nope. You don't have to have it to have a successful career in another field. But if you want to have a successful career in cybersecurity, and I'm sure there are some CISOs out there listening right now that are like, I have my MBA. I've never, been on the soft floor before in my life. I don't even know what you're talking about. What's Wireshark? Who have had successful careers or semi-successful careers. I'm sure that's happened.
Yeah, well, the success depends who's asking.
Right.
Sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is going to flow directly into my next question for Chris. But and we're going to get off this topic here. So I don't want to shift us if we're not ready. But that's something that's kind of always stuck with me as like you really do have to have a passion to do this. And it's not, I'm not saying like, oh, you got to be passionate. This isn't HR putting something out there, passionate about cybersecurity. No. When I say passionate about cybersecurity, I mean you have to be that guy or girl or woman who likes to jump into the intricacies of how systems interoperate and how things are communicating on the internet. You've got to have that kind of, if you want to break into cybersecurity, that's kind of the passion that you have to have. So the dental hygienist who heard that it's a great idea and that it was worth money and that, there's a degree for it, sure. But if you're not like playing around with stuff on the weekends, Chris, I know you're vibe coding these days. You're doing a lot of fun stuff.
Yeah.
Then maybe it's not for you. So,
I'd say,
and what you hit on, go ahead.
I was going to say, I'd take that one step even further, right? You have to have passion for problem solving is what I'd say, right? You have to have the passion to go in, whether it's looking at a packet or talking to a client, right? You have to have a passion for solving the problem, right? Like if you can't get excited about that, or at least be average in terms of your excitement level, you're going to have a really hard time, right? Like, truthfully, I don't get excited about doing packet analysis. I don't do that very much anymore anyways, right? But I kind of fought through that early in my career, right?
Well, and they're all encrypted now, too.
Yeah, it doesn't, there's so much of it that doesn't matter.
Right. And on that beginner level, though, if you want to break into cybersecurity, you're going to have to start there. You're going to have to start at the beginning.
I think it's just like any career, you're going to have to take your licks, right? Like that's part of the deal, right? And I think, and I tell this to guys a lot is that, one of the best things that I ever did in my career really early is, you mentioned what packet analysis and all that stuff is, as much as I didn't want to spend all this time learning the TCP/IP stack, I had to, right? I just had to do it, right? To get that base knowledge. Now, don't ask me too many questions about it. That was 15 years ago, right? Like, I'm not going to remember everything, right? But like, there's certain things you just got to go do. I hate to be the guy who's like, got to work hard work. But like, there is some credence to that within, our industry, is that sometimes you just got to buckle down and do this shit you don't like, right? That's part of the deal. And it's interesting. We talk about technology and like, finding your passion, right? There's nothing wrong with being passionate about a specific piece of technology too, right? Like you can be very successful in this industry and being passionate about Splunk or being passionate about Microsoft Defender, right? Like there's ways to do that, right? So sometimes it's about finding your passion within the space, right? Not just for the whole space, right? To kind of break through a little bit. Yeah. Thank you. That's a great question.
Okay. So currently in Congress, there is this exploration that they're considering, and it's part of a bill. It's called a letter of Marque, and it's spelled MARQUE. So maybe that's got something to do with something. I don't know. But it's similar to what Congress would issue to privateers when there was a huge piracy problem in the 1800s. Meaning you can kind of be a vigilante on your own, attack the pirates, and not have to worry about any reciprocity from the United States. And what this does is it legalizes, it kind of gives historical government issued privateer licenses to legally authorize operators to attack U.S. adversaries. So basically we could, in theory, get a bunch of these things for all of us and then feel free to attack, say, like Iranian targets or Iran or, other organizations, become our own APT, as it were. My question is this a good idea? Is this something that should be, we all know that, okay, we don't all know that, but what is often put forward in the news is that Russia really encourages the cyber criminal element that exists in Russia to go ahead and have fun, attack the US, steal the money, all that stuff, right? Whatever they can do, hinder them, right? And they don't go after them. Is that really a mentality that you think we should take here in the States when considering the adversaries we have as well?
This is what's the context? Like, are they actually proposing this in terms of like cyber?
It's in the bill that's going around right now. Now, just because it's in a bill doesn't mean it'll continue.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a terrible idea.
Yeah. So
but we all love the idea of Batman. Come on.
Here's
fictional.
AI breakdown, a theoretical government authorization that would allow private cybersecurity firms to legally launch cyber attacks against foreign adversaries or criminal groups in response to cyber attacks on the U.S.
So we could become a business, small veteran-owned business, no less, and then, be a private hacking firm that would just spend all day committing crimes as long as it's not against US people.
I immediately go to, okay, what's the financial gain here? So like, are we saying that we're allowing private cyber companies now to go and steal Bitcoin from somebody in Russia, like in ransomware them? Is that what we're saying? Like, that's a can of worms that I don't know that we want to open, right? Like that's the financial implications of that is immediately what I go to.
So from a historical standpoint, Chris, both Navy and Coast Guard.
Educate me.
Navy and Coasties here, right? The letter of marque for a privateer, right? So privateers were basically pirates that we hired to go and get other pirates, right? And so the only way you would be able to tell a privateer from a pirate was the letter of marque that you had from the U.S. government. Obviously, we have better ways of confirming that you're a U.S. entity who's attacking a foreign entity. I think there's a lot of subtext here, and it's really hard to get through that. Of course, my offensive security mindset thinks this is a great idea, and I love it, and I want to be able to do. My sense of justice and possibly worldwide government, I'm not a politician, so I think there's probably some ramifications that would happen if we allowed that to happen. But, first time hearing it, I kind of like the idea.
Really? Okay.
I kind of do.
Like,
but I reserve the right to change my mind knowing other things.
Yeah,
or when I learn what the actual kind of, and look, if you think about it, this is kind of spaces where Frank and I came from.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say that it seems like this is just another way for them to outsource government jobs to the private sector.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, now if there's a government contract involved and like you're authorized by DoD or whoever or NSA to go do this as a private company, I think that's different than just saying, all right, you guys go do whatever the hell you want in the offensive security space and go after our enemies, right? Like I don't know. That's what I would need to understand. Like, how is this actually being implemented? Like, what are the details here? How are we going about this? Because I said this, right? I think about the financial part of this, right? But like, we can't even right now, like, and this is going to go weird, guys. I promise this is going to go weird. Okay. So like you look at the state of Colorado, right? I'm going to talk about legal marijuana or depending on where you're at, right? Like those organizations, they struggle to put their money in the bank because of what they do, because of this weird legal gray area, right?
It's not federally legal. Yeah.
Yeah. So our banks, with all the regulations that are out there, all of a sudden it's going to be like the Chris, Frank, and Dustin Offensive Security LLC. It just got $1 million in Bitcoin from whatever, some offensive security thing. Is the bank just going to be like, cool?
Well, in all fairness, it's a lot easier to launder that than it is, drug money. Let's be clear.
True, but like, there's just a lot of like, how is a business going to function doing that? But now, if like we add, the DoD portion of this to where there's a legitimate contract involved and the pathway is clear, then I don't know. I think about the ramifications of another country, right? Like I understand Russia and China are already doing this to us, right? But is this just going to escalate where we currently haven't solved? I'm on the opposite side, Dustin, which is okay, I think.
Yeah, no, and I'm coming over to your side because the more I think about it, when we did the privateer thing, we were a young budding country, and like most of our income came from exporting and importing goods and services, right? I'm not saying that it doesn't now. I don't know how the economy works anymore. But back then, we were so young that we didn't even have like a military or a military force to be the privateers, right? So that's why we had to hire somebody. We have that right now. Not only that. Also, like there is this responsibility, right? As most Americans believe, we are the greatest nation, the richest nation, the best nation. And so when you have a nation that's maybe poorer, whether that be monetarily or morally, does that make it okay to go ahead and do the same tactics that they're doing? And the answer usually is that no, because we are America, we have a responsibility to kind of be the bigger person. Now, don't get me wrong. That doesn't mean that if the bully comes and punches you in the nose, you don't punch him back or you don't fight back or whatever.
Of course. Yeah.
You gotta, then there's a separation of like, okay, what's actually going on here? What's actually being stolen? Where are we at? And then one more thing on the banks, and I'm sure this will get me assassinated, but banks launder money on a regular basis.
Oh yeah. All the time.
Drug dealers. And as long as you have enough money in the bank, then they'll go ahead and process it for you and launder it for you.
Yeah.
I think it's also interesting, though, because if you take a look at it from the perspective of the government, a letter of marque is considered doing a cyber operation now, right? It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of legal cover, and it takes a lot of secrecy, right? We, United States, the FBI has identified multiple different hackers that exist in these other states, and we have warrants out for them and so forth.
Yeah.
They're never going to get arrested, right? However, should we start doing these tactics as well? Takes a lot of heat off of the US government itself, while at the same time giving them a tool that they can arguably, you can pull that letter anytime you want. It's a lot easier, I imagine, to pull this letter of marque and say, oh, now you're not protected anymore. Now you can be prosecuted and stuff like that, than it is when you are directly hired by a government organization or you are part of a company that has a government contract to perform actions. We talk a lot about expediting paperwork. And, Project Warp Speed was an example of that, how we were able to get the COVID-19 vaccine in 9 months. But this is another expeditious way to enable someone to do these tactics while at the same time giving them no cover, except for a flimsy piece of paper, arguably, that can be pulled. And then, so I think it's a high risk, potentially high reward scenario. I would view myself or any other hacker in this situation, or attacker, or, white hat, whatever you want to call it. It's all a matter of perspective, right? I would view it as a very risky situation where there's a lot to be made, but the more successful you are, the more of a target you are for both sides of the equation, the people you're working with and the people you're working against, right? So from that perspective, it'd have to be a very serious calculation on whether I think anyone would want to take this route for any type of career growth. Let's put it that way.
If I were a conspiracy theorist, let's get weird here, right? And I were a government that was attempting to turn totalitarian. And I had a group of people who were government trained to hack into any system. And I was going to take that away from them in one way or the other. And I was kind of scared of what they might be able to do if they retaliated against me being the government who fired them and the capabilities they had. And I wanted to remove that threat element. This is kind of one way to do it. You might have to remove this entire thing, Frank, from...
Well, so like the idea...
You have to go in and edit this part out.
The idea of a letter of marque being used to provide it to someone who is on the right side to go after people who might be disenfranchised.
So think about it this way. If
you're talking about you're talking about domestic versus domestic.
If a government employee blows the whistle, right? And they say, hey, I actually intercepted this communique between I can't think of anybody, like a cabinet member to another cabinet member, right? You have protections. If you're a private organization and you somehow intercept that and you have a letter of marque to protect you, they'll be like, well, actually, that doesn't protect you against this. We're taking that letter of marque, just like you said, Frank. It's easier to revoke. So they could just take it away and be like, now you're in prison and we don't believe anything you say because you're a criminal.
I like that.
Again, we can remove this whole thing from this episode.
I don't think you're that far off, though, right? It's a very real possibility that thing gets ripped away if you do something they don't like.
I said two things that are going to get me assassinated now. So, what?
I don't know. Yeah, this whole thing is. I had no idea this was happening. This is was being proposed. This is wild.
I love it, Frank. I love you bringing this up. And actually, to kind of pivot so I don't get killed by saying anything else that's stupid. So Chris, I always think of you in my mind as a wartime consigliere. I've seen you, jump, and Frank, I've seen you do this too. Both of you both have jumped into being kind of like a temporary CISO position for organizations that have just suffered breaches and how to fix those breaches, right? And how to improve the overall cybersecurity posture of an organization. If you had to take like one thing away from, because I know both of you have done this on multiple occasions, if you had to take away one thing, two things, if you had to take away one thing from how they could have prevented that from happening, is there kind of a common theme that you see with those organizations? And then the second part of this question is, what's the first thing you do when you walk into a situation like that with a company who just suffered a major breach and needed to bring you in? So first part is there a theme to these organizations that you're seeing? The second part is, what's the first thing you do with those organizations?
Yeah. So the theme, I like this, Dustin. This is a good one. The theme, right? Every single one of these.
Might not be, but yeah.
What's that?
There might not be.
No, there is.
If you've seen one.
There is.
I got one too, but I bet Chris and I have the same answer. So go ahead.
I don't know. I don't know. We do have the same brain, Frank. I don't know. We'll see on this one. The theme that I see across all of these companies I walked into post breach, right, is that it's a split. The view of risk is split, right? No, that's the wrong way to say it. Risk focus is incorrect. I think it might be the right way to say this, right? In terms of you've got a group of people that are all wearing 15 hats. How do you focus on the cybersecurity risk, right? Versus like a disaster recovery risk, right? That they don't have the people to focus on the risks that are involved with that, right? Which is kind of like coupled with process a little bit. It was like, how are they doing processes, right? That I think that's the biggest commonality I see, right? Is that these places you walk into, they don't have the staff, they don't have the experience. How can you expect them to focus on a risk that they don't have the experience to identify, right? That's a huge theme I see across all of it. And the first thing I do anytime I walk into one of these places is actually nothing technical. It's nothing process related. It's always okay, everybody calm the fuck down. Everybody chill out, right? Like, because like, be clear, right? When we typically walk into an environment, right? The incident is over, right? It's done. It's, the bad guy is out. We've now gone into, okay, we have this huge issue. How do we remediate this going forward in terms of the program, right? And anytime that happens, there's always this immediate reaction by like leadership internally of like, oh my God, we got to fire all 10 people, right? We got to get rid of these people. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Right. So my first thing is always everybody calm down, chill out, relax, slow down, right? We will fix this. It's going to take time. Knee-jerk reactions are the worst thing in the world right now, right? Anytime after a breach, you always hear about like, well, this is when the checkbook opens, which is very true, right? And the checkbook opens, it's not for a week, right? It's usually a couple of months, right? You've got some time there, right? You don't have to go do all these knee-jerk reactions right away, right? So that's always my first thing is like, all right, everybody calm down. Chill out. We will fix this, right? We're going to put together a plan. Nobody's getting fired, right? Like, nobody's getting fired yet. Like, let's get through this. Let's see where we're at, right? And I'd say 9 times out of 10 going into those and having that conversation is you get a couple of months in, right? And it's never a lack of this person didn't know what they were doing, right? It's that this person was doing 15 other things, right? Like that's usually what comes out of that. So you got to just calm people down a little bit because it sucks. It's the worst, for a lot of companies, it's one of the worst things that's ever happened to them, right? So it's you got to kind of back them off the ledge a little bit. All right, Frank, let's hear what yours is. I'm ready.
For the second part of the question, I agree with you a lot, Chris. And I think it's the same. I'd say the first thing I do is a vibe check. Because that then determines the approach. I'll give an example. I recently had a client and I'm working on a report and there was a miscommunication on their end on which way they wanted the report to go. I sent it to their boss rather than directly to them. And the boss had asked for it and was in communication and they had never said, don't send it to boss, send it to me first. And I did that. And then they're like, they were perturbed. And so I was like, all right, let's have a meeting. And then the first thing I did was, and I think this is where if you have what's the word I'm looking for? I'll back it up a bit. A lot of people in cybersecurity have asked me, do you have any tips that are not cyber related for cyber? And I tell them one of the best things my mother ever forced me to do, and it was a real weird thing to make a 10-year-old do at the time, was read Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I'm not saying it's a human hand guide, but in a way it is. Yeah. It really gives you, if you can really read it, internalize it, and try to apply it, it'll give you a skill set that will help you across industries and across people and across what you're doing. So I'll first do a vibe check and figure out what's going on here. And then I'll try to relate to them instantly, ask them questions, use their name a lot, put them at ease. And that's what I did with this client. And we were talking about kids and all that. And I said, and they had grown kids. And I said, I said, oh, this is great. Tell me if you could give me any piece of advice, because you've seen kids grow through the whole spectrum. And I find a lot of people who have full grown kids love this question. And I actually appreciate the answers too. It's like, what's the one piece of advice you give me? And we started with that. So then by the time we got to the issue, we were all buddies and chums, right? It was just a miscommunication and everything's sorted and going forward. And I'd say, especially after an incident, when you can talk to them and relate to them on a fundamental level that is personal and outside of the field of cyber, they stop viewing you as a consultant or a hired gun or something. They start to view you as a friend, as a human, right? And then you then can bring to the table, okay, now let's talk about this problem. And the thing I always like to separate, even if someone did fail, you're not there to collect scalps. You're not there to attribute. It does nobody any good if you walk into a room and start attributing blame, right? You're there to fix a problem, not to find a person, right? Now, to the first point of that then, how do these things happen? There's an upcoming scholarly paper that says the biggest viable attribute of selection of key frameworks in cybersecurity is bias. And I found that's not just with framework selection, that's just with day-to-day operations. There's a lot of bias. And a lot of the incidents I've seen happen with a lot of my clients were preventable, but due to a bias that was in place by either the team in general or someone on the team, it happened. Chris worked with me with another client where there was a huge database that was just completely unpatched and just left hanging out there because it was acquired through an experience at this company that they didn't really care about. It didn't mean much to the cyber team or the IT team, and it wasn't going to be used much in operations. So they just let it hanging there, right? And they didn't really care about it. So, well, big deal. It was the bias there. And, well, that's how the incident started. So I'd say those are the big contributors there. There's a lot of bias. There's a lot of assumptions that come into play. And sooner or later, you know what assuming does. It makes an ass out of you and me, right? And when you're at work, it's going to make an ass out of the company as well.
Yep. Yeah.
So that's my thought there. I've got a few questions that I want to throw you guys. And the first one is more, probably thoughtful. As we're seeing these chip agreements come into place with AMD and NVIDIA and so forth, where a certain percentage is being given, to the government of sales in China. Okay, that's weird, but, there's a lot of weird stuff going on right now. My question for you is, do you think this will then happen across all other chip manufacturers, to include U.S. ones like Intel, which, Intel at this point, the only thing they could give you is debt, let alone, any revenue. That's a whole other discussion. Do you think we'll see this grow further? And how do you think it will actually change the industry?
I want to hear Dustin's answer first, because truthfully, I'm not that knowledgeable on this. Like, I get the question, but I don't know that I have the knowledge base to give a informed opinion on this. I'd love to hear what Dustin says.
We always see these consolidations happen, right? And we've seen this in the chip industry before. Frank, you and I were talking about this earlier this week. I don't know if you guys remember this.
That's why I wanted to bring it up today.
Yeah. So the Cyrix processor was like the hot shit when it first came out. And it was, you would see AMD, you would say Intel, you would say Cyrix, and maybe 3 or 4 other brands. Like when computing got really cheap and people were able to kind of buy it on CompUSA was around, those kinds of things. And so then you saw this consolidation start happening where AMD bought Cyrix. And then AMD became the hot shit. And then Intel and AMD, Intel bought a couple of the other ones. And so then you saw this kind of like just, eventually it comes down to 2 major players, right? And then they kind of go back and forth on who does better when it comes to the manufacturing, the engineering, and all that other stuff. And so this is kind of where I see this going. And with ARM processing is going to change the world, right? To quote Angelina Jolie from Hackers.
Yeah.
That's like the one true thing that was said in Hackers that actually came true. And like, I remember seeing that at the time and going like, no, it's not. But then of course, magic internet brick and every single IoT device that we have is all ARM processing. And so we kind of see this like, it's like the war, right? It's like the manufacturing war that's happening where it's like, we're just going to keep grabbing all these people who have these great ideas. And then or eventually we're just going to end up with 2 manufacturers. I don't know if that answered your question or not, but that's kind of where I see this going. Yeah.
But hey, no bad answers.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I did not know that AMD were giving a portion of their profits to.
I think
the
AMD
Chinese
is.
government.
I know Nvidia is. I think AMD
Nvidia, okay.
Too.
I didn't know that was happening. Silly me for not knowing. It kind of makes sense though. Yeah.